Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, gentlemen, and a happy Tuesday to you.
Jumping in. It feels like these weeks are just clipping by. I can't believe it's halfway through October already, but here we go.
Oh my gosh. You got all the Halloween costumes out there too for the kiddos? Have they decided?
We have been looking for them. We're not a family who usually buys Halloween costumes. When I was a kid, I did not really celebrate Halloween very much at all or ever. So I was like, Halloween's just a waste of a holiday. Like, not a big deal. So we never really did anything on Halloween. And my wife's family did do Halloween, but it was always kind of like they had a couple sets of costumes and they just kind of like reused. It's like everyone has the clown costume. So every year one kid was a clown, no matter what. Someone had overalls and they became a farmer for every year. But the kids are like, want to go buy these costumes, the inflatable things.
Oh yeah, the dinosaur,
T-Rex. The T-Rex dinosaur thing. Or one year, my son bought a little like drummer set with like an inflatable thing, these little plastic drumsticks, and you would have the drum set all around. It was quite annoying because it was so big, and everywhere he ran, he was like, because the fabric was rubbing against itself. I thought it would be really funny. So have you guys ever played or seen the game? It's the little robots that run around on the space station and they kill each other.
Oh, I know.
You know, what's the name of the game? I'm literally dropping the name. I can see the characters. I can't remember the name.
They're all like different colors.
All different colors.
If you're alone in a room with them, that's when they kill each other.
Yes.
It's basically the plot of the thing.
Yes.
This is showing our age. We're old. We forget
Dang
all
it.
the
forget everything. This is so bad.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Anyways, those characters, if you went on to like Temu, you're able to find like a whole family of different colors and characters. It's like, let's just be them. Let's all be the little, I want to say it's like Alone, but it's not that game. Not that name of the game. Oh, dang it. Tommy, Google the game. Figure out what the game name is.
I was about to say
Among Us.
Among Us.
Data Donna in chat. Thank you very much.
Among Us, the game.
Among Us.
So that's the game, and it was like, let's just be Among Us, and then we'll just run from door to door, and then we'll sneak behind bushes and just pop out and run around. Like, I think that's almost like, yeah, it was really funny. I just thought it tickled my funny bone, but everyone was like, no, veto, Dad, that's a dumb idea. We're not doing it. I'm like, dang it.
You're like,
okay, fine.
I know one of you thought of this. Everyone thought that was a great idea.
I'm going to grab my microphone. I'm going to walk around. I'm going to be a podcaster from the Explicit Measures podcast. That's what I'm going to be for Halloween.
You know, there's something to be said, Mike, about coming up with an idea as a dad where it can automatically get vetoed. Where if anyone else in your family thought of that idea, they were going, that's a great idea. We should definitely do that.
Yeah.
But it's a dad idea. Seth, you got anything?
Well, I mean, the kids. One is still fitting into the costume she bought last year.
Excellent. That's like the best.
It was so big,
double year,
and it was like okay, we're gonna get one more year out of it. Sweet. The older one wants a new one, so I forget what he wants to be. But while you guys were talking, as far as like great dad ideas, which are total not good ideas, like recently, my brothers and I, like actually this was last night, started chatting back and forth in the vernacular of young kids these days, picking up all the words and stuff. That's a terrible idea.
It's a very bad idea.
Go as a school age boy, right? Like dropping all the words.
You working on your Riz?
Today, yeah, Sigma.
You know what I realized that we got older? When
crazy.
did long socks get popular?
Yeah,
if
they snuck up on you.
If I spent a day in junior high with long socks, I would have been ridiculed out of school. No
the
date, not that it happened anyways.
Are coming back.
Yeah,
full force.
But you got to roll them now. You get the Nike socks, you pull them up really high, and then you roll them back down or something like that. That's what my daughter does.
I wouldn't have been allowed to go to prom if I wore long socks to high school. Like that's how bad it was. Man.
Never really went to prom stuff. Boring. Wasn't really into computers.
I got a lot of negatives, sir. Yeah. So story for another day.
So yeah. Excellent. Anyway, looking forward to Halloween again. There's a good friend that always throws a party and coincides with his daughter's birthday. So
excellent.
Good day. It's a good day. Giving out candy and having a party in a driveway.
Nice. We're jumping in for our main topic today. We'll do a couple more news and announcement things here. But our main topic for today is going to be working with custom visuals. There's 2 kind of really awesome custom visuals. There's a whole bunch more, 150 plus more on the Microsoft App Source for Power BI. You can go get custom visuals from there. What are our opinions? What is an MVP perspective on custom visuals? Should we learn how to build things like things in Charticulator or things in Denb? Are there any other ones that we are aware of that we should be learning how to use inside Power BI? And maybe some of our experiences around working with custom visuals. So that's going to be our main topic for today. But before we get in there, I do have a kind of an open question. This is not really a news article. This is just kind of a random question for everyone. Have you guys been using dark mode in desktop? And what are your thoughts? What are your initial reactions? This has been released now for like a couple of weeks. It's been out. I immediately raced to desktop to turn it on, and I've been using it. How about you guys? What do you think?
I'll do this in the way of my favorite commercial. Oh yeah.
Is that cool? That's Kool-Aid, right?
Kool-Aid Man.
Yeah, the Kool-Aid Man.
Mike, I'm with you 1,000% with the dark mode. Yeah, there are some things you're like, oh, it's kind of weird, but I mean, my workflow, my eyes have not been read on this podcast for a long time. Thanks, dark mode. So no, I would say the dark mode. I'm so happy that it's part of Power BI Desktop now after 9 years, but still happy it's there. It's absolutely been a game changer for me. From I think a well-being point of view has been a game changer.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm not saying that you guys are, but
I'm gonna definitely lie on this one. That's for sure.
I am a dark mode guy. Everything's dark mode.
Yep.
However, I find that if I don't seize the moment, I am like, oh yeah, I should go do that and go do it.
Yep.
I forget to do it.
Oh.
So I've been in one of these cycles where it's all about just tons of data engineering, tons of data validation. I'm throwing things. I'm in Power BI daily,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Validating, doing things, and it has never crossed my mind since. So as we're talking about it today, I'm going to write it down.
Go over to the computer and turn it on.
Go over to my
right now.
Like,
go turn it on
dark mode.
Yes. So this is not a gripe. This is maybe just a general feedback. I like the dark mode. I'll just be clear. I like dark mode. It looks really good. The Copilot icon really pops against that black. I mean, it's definitely, I think this was all marketing ploy, honestly. This was going dark mode was only so they could highlight Copilot more, I believe. I think that's really what they were doing here.
Oh, okay.
So that's what was happening. I like it a lot. The only 2 icons I really don't love is now the Power Apps icon in desktop is almost undetectable because it's got like this dark purple to it on top of a black background. So but I don't use a lot of Power Apps, so it's not my thing. Building tables, building models, building DAX query view stuff. If you're doing like data modeling exercises, dude, dark mode is like the cat's meow. I love it. It's good on my eyes. It feels like I'm in VS Code. It's got the dark mode. I love everything about it. It's really solid. There hasn't been any UI issue. Sometimes you get into like a UI issue, like if you're in like Power Query and like the header or the text or something will be a little bit off. It feels like none of that has even happened. Like everything feels clear and legible. There's no text that is, black text on a black background. I have not observed any parts in the tool that are hiding text because of just some weird formatting of what's going on. So it's no problem there. The only thing I do have a gripe with is it just feels so stark when I'm building the report now. So if I'm doing the modeling of stuff, not a problem. As soon as I get to modeling, doing the report piece, the report area is just so bright now compared to the trim of the desktop dark mode. I feel like we're going to get a wave of influence or subliminally influenced. Like we're going to get a bunch of people building dark mode reports now. We're going to get a lot of reports that are going to come out using like a darker theme on top of them. And I think I've even seen on Twitter now a little bit more I've seen a little bit more people just building darker things in themes because I feel like it's just it's very bright now compared to what it used to be.
I thought you were going to go the other way. And to your point, Mike, this is actually from a great book called Nudge. And when you change slight things in your environment, how much that can adapt or dictate to change later. I thought you were going to say you're going to see more of like pastel or pastel colors, like more lighter colors.
Maybe.
Because you want to contrast it, but I see what you're saying. Something's going to change.
I think
influence something.
I think by changing that entire background all the way around the outside edge. I think it really just kind of influences your mantra or like your vibe around what you're trying to build. And I think you might start seeing. So all I'll say is pay attention to social medias, watch what's coming out. I'm guessing you're going to see just a handful of more darker themed visuals and reports and things that are going to try to. People are inspired now by having the dark mode. They're going to say, well, I should build a dark background. I should build dark things inside desktop. And so there's going to be some sort of kind of push, I think, from people to build stuff there a little bit more in the darker mode. Anyways, just some food for thought. I do like it, though. It's awesome.
I wonder if this will change people, though, to your point, even where you're like, oh, this report looks great. The canvas is great. They publish it. They go back to normal Power BI. Go, those colors actually don't look as great as I thought. Because honestly, there's not a lot of browsers, and Power BI service doesn't have a dark mode, right?
Correct.
So the only thing you can influence from the outside of the canvas is the wallpaper, which usually will also dictate your theme and what other colors you're going to do. So I could see at least myself doing this in dark mode, choosing colors that look great in dark mode. And I'm not saying a dark theme. It can still be a light theme, but things that go well with the environment around me of the dark colors. As soon as you publish that, it's going to have a different look. Saying it's worse.
It's interesting. It's interesting. You guys are going down that path because even having not turned it on yet,
yes,
I would see that 90% of like me developing, right?
Yep.
Which, to be frank, isn't tons. Anymore.
Which is like 10% in reality. 90%
is it's to the point that I want to build like focus on the visualization. Then I turn it off. I was planning on turning it off. I don't see how you would build a report for like fit for purpose out in the wild in dark mode.
And this is where I think maybe my head is going a little bit
specifically for what you were talking about.
Yes, because you're going to be influenced by like you're looking at the aesthetic of the page, and you're seeing the aesthetic of that contrasting against the very dark background. Exactly. And to your point, Seth, like you go to Power BI.com and Tommy, you're making a great point as well. You go to the service is all kind of brighter and lighter, anyways. This is where I'm starting. I'm starting to waffle on this. Where do I actually build the reports now? Because now that I have Git integration, I'm less inclined. Again, Tommy's going to say no. I'm going to say I'm less inclined to build report stuff inside desktop anymore. I'm building more and more in the service.
You can sit off in your 1% land. That's fine.
Yeah, because you're missing half the features in the service anyways. You don't have buttons. You don't have bookmarks.
Anyway, we're going to stick to custom visuals and
visuals. You have buttons and you have bookmarks.
No, you are missing some features, my friend, in the service.
Yes, and then what I would maybe even argue with you, Tommy, on this one. So I agree with you. There is some missing features. However, I've also decided that in my building stuff in desktop mode, I'm trying to intentionally use less of the advanced features. So I have found if I'm building really complex reports, it means a lot less people can maintain them. And I'm trying to build simpler reports in desktop.
You are changing your reports for your style of development, which is fine.
Sounds like
it's streamlined, but
it's streamlined more. But I mean, if you really want well, again, I'm also in a mode where I need to hand stuff off to other people. So like I'm building stuff and I'm giving it to other teams to own. And so if I have to write a lot more documentation around here's how all these bookmarks work. Oh, by the way, you don't even really know what they do because you can't look at any of the code to do them. So you just have to trust that this bookmark is going to do the right thing. And I have to. It's just. I've done classes on this, and people start getting lost when you have like really complex bookmarks, hiding and showing things. So to me, if I'm going to build something, I'm going to hand it off to another team. I'm going to try and build the basic reporting element and not throw a bunch of bells and whistles on it unless I know I'm working with someone who's going to be able to maintain it when I leave and give it back to them. So that's one of the reasons why I'm simplifying things and trying to make it as those things are nice to have UI UX elements. They're not necessarily functional for like getting the answers about the data out. And I try and think about how can I get the data to the answer out first, and then maybe we come back with a little bit of UI UX tweaking.
I would agree. If we're talking internal reporting, 100% agree. Make it as simple, especially if it's newer teams. They need to get acclimated. There's so much they should be focusing on first. in terms of like the value they can bring, and 90% of that's going to be with DAX, right? The things that they can do as far as the calculations on the raw data and visualizing things simplistically with those calculations well before you start diving into all of the things that you could make Power BI turn into like an application page.
Sure.
Because the complexity to that, if not driven by the business, is 100% it's the maintenance. So in the case of like internal reporting, 100% agree. It like love the features are there because it allows us for, especially for like customer facing reporting or
100%
things where somebody comes in with wild ideas of, I want my report looking like a UI, or I'm going to plug it in, it should operate like this. Then it's there for that. But don't start there. Certainly do not start there.
Of course. But I think also the two statements that were said can coexist together. Just because there's an advanced feature doesn't mean by nature it's complex. So the idea of having a bookmark in your report,
the word advanced implies complex. I would argue
a little bit more complexity. Yes.
So the bookmark feature, drilled through feature, is that an advanced feature?
No.
Or is that a basic feature?
I think that's basic stuff. I mean, I don't bookmarking.
Fine.
But if you're tying a bookmark to a button where you're going to switch out which visual you're going to use on the report. I mean, there's also
been every KPI swinging in like on a
exactly. Can you please add animation to everything? Let's do animate everything.
I agree. No, we're on the same page there.
but to your point, there's actually been new features that have maybe deprecated some of these advanced building features, right? So I wasn't able to change a bar chart to a pie chart or a column chart or something. I couldn't change that. You can now personalize the visuals. Well, that requires no advanced customization. That's just built into the tool now. So like, people need to learn how to do it, but I'd rather push people to customize the visual. You figure it out, as opposed to me building fancy buttons and things that toggle between stuff, right? That's more of my opinion.
We just had an episode on that too, about the personalized visuals. And I feel like this is a pretty good segue as we talk about some advanced features and as we talk about visuals.
I would agree with this. So let's transition. Let's go to our main topic, I guess. Go ahead, Tommy.
Oh no, this is all Seth.
Oh, it is. Okay, great. Seth, take it away.
This is a mailbag question. When was this dropped into the mailbag, Tommy? Was it a while ago?
It might have been a while ago. You guys have been
2020
mailbags. 2020.
I don't know.
I mean, either it's a user that's just coming on to things that were built a long time ago. Congratulations, Mike. Your stuff still lives on, or it was a while ago.
It's probably the videos. Believe it or not, the Charticulator videos that we've done still get a good amount of hits these days, and as well. So this is why Seth is referencing this. Go ahead, read the question, Seth. And we'll tease me more about my old videos.
I recently found the podcast because I stumbled on the Charticulator tutorials Mike Carlo posted on YouTube. Right away, I'm getting great recognition within my company for building more complex, customized visuals beyond the standard visuals within Power BI. Are there other tools, resources out there for people like myself who want to differentiate themselves with more complex visuals inside Power BI?
And I'll also add this user. Thank you very much for the question. You also added some amazing icons in there. So, getting recognition with your more custom Power BI visuals. There's like a gold medal, like winning. Like I'm like, everything. Yeah, that's
so.
One, I'm very awesome.
Which is great because it shows up in our Power BI report. The icons do too, which you can also do.
Yeah, Tommy scrapes all the questions from the website and puts them into a Power BI report that he can kind of groom through and watch it. It refreshes. Is it every day?
Every day.
Every 10 minutes, Tommy refreshes the report. We're using all the premium.
My GitHub got
so Tommy can look at the comments coming in from the podcast. All one of them every day.
I was compiling for a title. He uses 80% of our engine.
We're running it through advanced AI. We're using so many CUs. 50% of our capacity is just sitting there monitoring.
I want to know what word we use the most, and apparently it's the.
or it'd be funny. It comes out.
Scrape it. Oh,
goodness gracious, that's funny. Well, okay. So about the topic. So custom visuals, awesome. Let's pay some homage to Charticulator because that's kind of like a really interesting product that Microsoft made. Let's give a little bit of history on what that is for people who don't know what Charticulator is, and maybe we we drop back just a little bit and say, what are custom visuals and how do they interact with Power BI Desktop? So Charticulator is a research project that came out of Microsoft Research. It was an open source HTML-based visualization program. It ran on, I think it ran on D3.js, which is a visualization JavaScript-based language. And the idea was, look, no one really wants to write code to build visuals. What we really want is we want like a graphical editor. And so Charticulator was this research project from Microsoft Research. You could send it a data set. And once you had the data set, you could basically build bars and a chart, basically add visual elements to some sort of charting system. And then you could bind different dimensions, the color of the bar to a data point, the height of the bar to a data point, the width of the bar to a data point. And then Charticulator would kind of know how to bind all these data elements to visual properties of shapes or images. So this is how you could build like a lollipop chart. You'd have a lollipop, the stick would go up a certain height, and then you could put a bubble on the top, and then the size of the bubble could be some other data point, whatever you wanted, right? So you could start building these more creative things. If you could dream it and you could put shapes on a page, you could then leverage the idea of bringing these data elements from Charticulator into that. So that's kind of the starting point of what Charticulator is. A graphical design system for building very flexible charts. So there were some other interesting things that it did too. Had some in visual calculations, some grouping inside the visual, things we couldn't do typically in normal Power BI visuals.
Very much the first of its kind.
I would agree.
Yeah, because I don't think any other, and I've used a few other business intelligence tools. I don't remember anything that had that type of user interface or that kind of conceptual design.
In the Microsoft ecosystem, I'd say no.
Yeah.
You'd have to go other places to find a similar
Tableau
design system to building visuals. Tableau, it almost, so my argument with like when I did the video for YouTube was Charticulator is the solution for Tableau for Power BI, right? Because we have all these standard visuals and I just drag a field over and boom, a bar chart shows up. But I couldn't adjust the width of the bars, or I couldn't really stylize the text at the end of the bars, or there was other things you just couldn't do to tweak it and get what you want out of it. So Tableau was more around like, okay, what do you want to build? Add data elements to shapes on a page, and it will know how to build the visual chart for you. So it felt a lot more like Tableau could build very flexible, highly creative, very unique versions of visuals, and it had more ability to do more creative things. Right. There was definitely a larger learning curve. Sorry. Go ahead, Seth.
I from brief experiences a while ago with Tableau, Charticulator struck me as something that didn't feel the same, and was more customizable.
More customizable than Tableau, correct?
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But Power BI didn't have that story of like,
No, I get it.
So Power BI
it wasn't design first or led, right? Yeah.
Correct. Right. It wasn't just like, so in the world, and Tableau has probably changed a little bit now since I've played with it, because I my master's in data science, and that's kind of when I started mucking around with Tableau, and I was like, this is a crappy tool. I hate it. It's so slow. And then I was like, let me do all of my master's visualization program in Power BI, and I wowed everyone. So it was funny. Anyways, that being said, Tableau has this concept, or at least how it was designed. You design the visual, like you get like a single visual and you bind data to what that visual is doing. And then once you have that visual built, you could then, kind of load it to a page, and then you would build the next visual, and you could build the next visual. Power BI took this approach of like, here's an entire page, build as many visuals as you want on one big page. And so the whole design process to me felt very different. When you brought in Charticulator, you'd go into Charticulator, you'd build the singular visual, and then you'd say, okay, this is what I want. And then I'd be done with it. And I'd say, save. It would save the definition of the visual and go back to the main page. And then you had this whole array of other visuals, and it would be interactive. It could cross filter things into your normal Power BI visuals and back. And so that was like, wow, this is really interesting. You could really build more. And Carrie, thank you very much. Carrie's one of our incredible visual builders on the internet. I got to give her mad credit, because everything Carrie makes is like top notch, great quality stuff. But she's telling us Tableau is more of a grammar of graphics, right? As opposed to what Power BI does, which is more of like a taxonomy approach. Here's my bar chart. This is the height of my bar. Fill out these fields, and you get the output. So anyways, that's kind of my initial impression. Let's go back to what custom visuals are, right? So Charticulator is this highly stylized visual. if you go back to the app source, so you can actually add your own visuals that companies publish into app source. Some companies publish things that are free. You can use them for free, no issue. Other companies have a paid license that goes along with this. So I think Zebra BI has a license of this. I'm trying to think of other custom visuals that you pay for, Tommy. Do you?
I think it's like Flight UI, but there's a few stacks of developer companies who have not just one, but you basically buy a subscription of like 25 visuals now. A lot of them, interestingly enough, are the standard visuals, but to your point, Mike, with added flexibility. So I would call them two segments, right? There's the custom visuals designs that are not available in Power BI.
Correct.
And there's companies who said, well, you have a bar chart in Power BI, but we can do a lot more with it.
Correct. More customization, more styling. Maybe there's like some, you can do edits in code and things. And so there's kind of a spectrum of what you're going to find on the marketplace. And so Charticulator fits into that, highly customized, don't need to pay for it. It's just you kind of get it and load it in. Now, the sad thing here has been Microsoft Research was owning the Charticulator visual. Charticulator has since been not deprecated, but unsupported from Microsoft. So Microsoft has since said, we're not going to support the Charticulator visual anymore. However, the community, and this is what's really cool about our community in Power BI, our community has stepped up. A gentleman by the name of Ilfat has picked up the torch of continually maintaining it, adding more features to it. And so he has there's now a community edition of Charticulator that he owns and has published to the Microsoft Store. And so Charticulator lives on. There is some support. Again, it's not through an official company, but it is continually getting support and new features as it moves forward. So I'm very pleased to know that people like the visual enough that it's still getting supported. There's still people who know how to build it, and there's people that are maintaining it still.
That is good news. I thought it was going to just kind of
go by the
wayside. On the vine.
Well, there was a lot of effort put into it to make it this amazing thing, and it just kind of never really went anywhere.
Do you find, Mike, and you've done a lot of work on custom visuals, especially Charticulator we have a great video series. As I look at the mailbag question, and I'm kind of phrasing today out, there are a few areas of custom visuals. I'm just going to go to the app source and I'm going to choose a custom visual that suits my needs at this time. Not a lot of research. Maybe it takes me 2 minutes because I'm looking for a text filter or I'm looking for a histogram. There's someone who's going to do a little more research. And then I think there's that third category of I'm going straight developer. I'm going straight into I have a very particular idea and I need a very particular solution. This person sounds like they're like, I need something. And they went straight to Charticulator. The question is that common? Do people find themselves going straight towards an advanced tool like Charticulator first?
Well, I'll say this, right? So if with standard visuals, there's a very low learning curve. Easy to get a visual on the page, easy to drop visuals on it. Charticulator had a number of kind of like weird bugs and things in it. So for me, when I was learning it, it was always like, it's cool. It can do a lot of really interesting things. I could build really elaborate visuals in there, stuff that I could not build in normal Power BI reports, plain and simple. But it took an entire mind shift difference for me to figure out how to build things in there in the right order, because you could build stuff, but you had to build things in a sequence that made sense to the visual. So a couple times I would build a visual and I would need 2 or 3 or 4 times trying to build it because, like that doesn't work, or there's a bug here and it wasn't binding the data correctly and it was kind of weird. So I know, okay, I had to make this bar chart thing first, and then I had to join it to this other part of the data chart elements, and then it would work. So there's just, it was more of a learning curve for me. And so, as long as you have some solid tutorials initially to build some of the basic stuff, what I recommend if you're ever building like advanced tools like Denb or Charticulator, start building basic chart types first. Learn the basics. Learn how to build a pie chart. Learn how to build a bar chart. Learn how to build a clustered column chart. If you learn how to build those things first, your mind will start changing on how it thinks on how to build those elements, and you'll get better at building more advanced things beyond that.
Yeah, a couple things strike me with the question itself. One is, I think this is an individual who like either had a specific problem they wanted to solve, right, and went looking for ways in which to build a visual, or knew about got onto the Charticulator. This is how you can go custom build, some visualizations. But you definitely have to have the go get spirit to start learning how to custom build a visual in Power BI. The other thing I would say is I'm reading it in such a way that the organization that they work for is pretty Power BI heavy, because the vast, like, if they're instantly getting recognition in their report, people and people like recognize that it's so different than what they normally see. That, to me, that speaks to a lot of folks see a lot of different reports, and this one's standing out, and they must have done a really good job with the visualization. These are all assumptions, but these are some of the things I'm picking up.
I like that you went that way, because that's exactly, I was trying to think of who are we talking about here? And is someone internal? Is someone, but to your point, that does see a lot of different things? I don't know if this is a little too far ahead, but this goes back to our intro, and I want to see if you can sell me on the value add for such an advanced visual. Just to your point, when we talked about advanced features in Power BI, we're also talking about an advanced feature here with Charticulator. If I'm internal, if I'm working in the system, and again, I'm not just researching, I'm not just doing my normal MVP things or testing something out, I have multiple reports I have to build. Where's the value add for something like Charticulator?
Where's the value add for Charticulator?
Or an advanced custom visual, not just normal. Yeah.
It's when the requests come in that you can't do the normal standard Power BI visual stuff, right? So it's the, there's Power BI and the visuals that you get today only do certain things. That's it. Before, we also had no in-visual calculations. And again, that's another feature that we have now with where you can write measures inside a visual that calculate things inside the measure. But even then, I would argue how many people are actually using that? I don't think very many. So we're talking about very edge case use things that you're like, to your point, Seth, earlier, right? The company recognizing your work on Charticulator means they understood the boundaries of what Power BI could typically do. Can we build this? There's a common knowledge like, oh, we can't build that because the Power BI visuals don't support it. Okay, interesting. So I've had other use cases where someone was like, hey, we want to build a thermometer in our report that's measuring temperature up and down, and it should be blue at the bottom and it should go red at the top. There's no standard visual that builds a thermometer and does that. You could do certain things, but you need a gradient. You need this thing to go up and down. There's all these extra features you need in order to build something that looks like a quote unquote a thermometer. So in order to do that, you start thinking about, well, what can I build to do or accomplish that type of thing? So that it's things like that where the company is looking to stylize a report. And I think, to your point, Seth, as well earlier, we're polishing reports either for executives or for external clients. We're trying to make it not look like Power BI and more like a web application. And that's where these custom visuals, I think, really start pushing on the edges of this is something we can build where it's now, well, I'll say this one as well. The designers who show up to Power BI and be like, hey, we're going to build reports. And they come in with this like really weird, like, okay, we want the numbers to look like exactly like this and have to have tick marks like this. And we have to have the numbers do that. And, when the formatting of the words happen, we want it to switch halfway through. It's all these really weird, like designer-based requirements that you're like, whoa, time out. That's not what Power BI does. You can't do that in Power BI. Most of what you're asking for is accomplishable, 80%. But that other 20% is not, you can't do it. And that's where I think the custom visuals pick it up. And to be perfectly honest, you can build full custom visuals, like write the code for the whole visual. There is a development kit for custom visuals that you can use. And the downside of this is you now have to be a developer. You have to write all code, you have to know how to write and build D3.js. And I think a lot of normal business users aren't ready for that level. And so when we talk about like Charticulator and particularly Denb, they are grammar-based visuals, meaning you define the spec or specification of how the visual works, and then the tool can interpret that spec and then build the visual for you. So it's a stopgap between, if you're building a full-on custom visual, you're talking 3 weeks, a month, maybe longer to figure out how to build everything. If you're talking about Denb and Charticulator, you get that visual experience within like days, maybe.
The frameworks are built
correct
for you to quickly build a custom visual.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. And I think, Mike, I agree with you. I think the two the two scenarios where you go down the custom viz route relate to either the somebody sees a visualization that Power BI doesn't natively have like support for. But a lot of those I think are covered in the app source now, right? Like it's pretty like I haven't run into a case where it's like what I would say a well-known or standard visual that just isn't native to Power BI isn't in app source. It's a click away usually. The other is where somebody comes in with, hey, I saw this thing in a slide, or I saw that this tool did this, or there was this really cool whatever. Can we go build that? And the answer is, well, I mean, what's great is the answer is probably without the full custom dev route. Using Charticulator or Denb. And I will probably start talking a little bit more about Denb. But I think that the stress point here for the organization is twofold. Cool, it's great you're building things, but this also kind of there's a part of this that speaks to our earlier part of the conversation where we were just talking about out of the box functionality that we completely limit or remove from the basics, right? Because as you add complexity, you're adding the complexity to support the solution, right? And when you introduce custom dev, custom building visuals, customized, bookmarks and buttons and all of this other stuff, you require a different level of developer to not only support it, but also build net new forward. So there is kind of a caution here where it's like, okay, great, you can build all those things, but the level of supporting them is also amped up a little bit.
So that's a very, very interesting point, because I want to first agree with Mike when it comes to the idea of, listen, if we're doing this, it's usually for an executive or leadership position. I'm not just doing this for the random Joes and Karens or whoever they are because of the amount of time. But Seth, you raise an interesting point. The amount of people in an organization who would be very familiar and or experienced with Charticulator or Denb is probably going to be small too. So if I were to build this in a leadership report, or for a very let's say a high level report, because that's the only value add, well, I may be the only person who knows how to do that, right? Or I have to train. Do I have to train someone for backup if I were to leave, go to Sicily? The whole idea of what we've talked about, value add from a skill point of view. If I'm the only person with that skill, well, I don't know. I'm now struggling with, okay, does that even make sense to even incorporate, especially in a leadership report? Again, not saying these tools are not worth it, because especially Denb nowadays too, and what it can do is amazing. But if I'm in an internal organization and I'm the only one with this skill and experience, well, what happens then? There's no backup. That's like me, the only person knowing Power Apps, and the company relies on Power Apps. What happens when I leave?
I mean, that's a process and a people thing. I'm not worried as much about that as far as what we're talking about here, right? So this is more about extending. So I agree with your statement there. Like, you do have to be mindful of, if you're going to build, this goes with anything, whether you're building more advanced bookmarks inside desktop that's already supported features of desktop anyways, or you're building things with Charticulator, or you're building things with AppSource or Power Apps. There's an idea that there's knowledge in someone's head that's building that thing. And if you don't have good documentation around it, or at least explaining it to someone else as you're transitioning, someone may get promoted and move on. And then what happens to that tool? It just kind of just lives on, and no one actually learns how to transition it. So that's, to me, that's more of a people and a process part of this. You have to make sure as a company, if you're deciding to go down this route for these more highly customized visuals, have a support plan, at least at some level, right? Or make it very aware that if we're going down this route, when Tommy gets a promotion and moves on and he's no longer mucking around with Charticulator, you're going to need someone to backfill that knowledge and get to a point where they understand, okay, we actually need some time for Tommy to sit down and learn this Charticulator thing so he can get into that space. So I definitely do think you don't want to have a single knowledge point of one person. As your company grows, as you get bigger, you definitely want to cross-train at least 2 people minimum, maybe more if you have the opportunity. I would also argue Charticulator is a great community practice teaching element, right? So if you have a community practice, you run something monthly or bi-monthly, this is a great opportunity. Sit down, do a 30-minute, 1 hour, here's an interactive demo of what Charticulator can do. Here's how Denb would work. And we're talking a lot about Charticulator. I do love it. But or though, when I'm trying to build custom visuals, if I'm doing anything custom beyond the normal visuals, I'm immediately going to Denb. Like Denb is my choice for custom visuals right now. Charticulator was just a bit too buggy for me. Denb is a bit more code, so I'm writing some JSON. But man, Denb is just incredible what it can do.
So that was I want to put a pin kind of where we've been to move into Denb, because I think that's naturally where the progression of the conversation goes. But I would say the last point to building any custom visualization is you have to treat it as what it is in your report, which is a unique piece that needs to be well documented, at least from an implementation standpoint, so that somebody else could triage a potential problem or fix it, like adjust something, so you don't need to know everything about it, but you need to know that it's this special type of object, right? And somebody else to support it. So you are adding complexity to the solution, but you mitigate that a little bit. With that, I guess, treating it like a specific implementation within the larger report. So Mike, you were naturally just moving on to the next area where I thought we were going to go any, which is great, which was, should the poster, because they were asking, are there other tools or resources out there for people like myself who want to differentiate themselves? When we look at custom visuals, Charticulator was the great starting point, but since then, Denb has emerged. And what makes I think you were rapidly going into what makes Denb different, but there is, I think, two things that we should lean into. What makes Denb different, and two, I think there's a lot more capabilities Denb has related to building custom visualization than Charticulator ever would have.
I think the reason why I like Denb so much is because it is less, what I call less buggy than when I use Charticulator, because Charticulator really required me to build things in a certain pattern, in a certain direction. If I didn't have certain elements on the page and I didn't correctly bind them together correctly, I had a hard time undoing that and making it work. So to be very clear, I've been working with Ilfat. I've been talking to him about Charticulator and what's happening there. We actually have an early version of Charticulator on our site at Power BI Tips. We have charts.Power BI Tips, which is a derivative of Charticulator. It's a bit older in nature. We're actually trying to work with Ilfat now to get ours updated, so it's the current community version of it, because we want to support the community with these really rich tools. But that being said, there was just a little bit of friction for me inside Charticulator that was like, you know what, Denb solves this problem. And so since Denb is a declarative visual and it works solely on, here's the specification, you write this code and it works very consistent. And if you adjust the code, it was very easy to adjust. Okay, it talks about this thing called marks, right? So there's like a canvas, and then on there you have marks, and then the marks have properties. This mark is a bar, a rectangle, and it has a width and a height, and you can bind different data properties of that bar. Or it has a color, and you're going to make a gradient scale, and you're going to start doing those elements as well. So that's really why I really transitioned to Denb, because I felt like I had more control of designing what I wanted to, and it was less buggy because I could literally delete some line of code, replace it with something else, and see it change how the visual works. And so I think that's the nice part here. It was more consistent from a developer experience, and it does more things. Like there's Daniel Marsh Patrick. I got to give him a huge shout out. This is a solo project. It's made by a single individual on his nights and weekends building this visual. He's made it from scratch. He's integrated it, and it's actually built on a technology that's not his. It's built on a spec called Vega and Vega Lite. Yeah. These are I don't know, I don't remember which university it came out of. Maybe, Carrie, maybe you can fact check me on where Vega and Vega Lite came from. But there's a university that has built this specification to interpret code, turn it into D3.js, stuff on the back end, and it renders the visuals for you. So it's one layer of abstraction away of writing the raw code to make the visual run. So what Daniel did says, look, I'll give you an editor inside desktop. I'm going to give you a visual renderer that renders it in a preview window, and you hit done, and it just makes the visual work. So that experience, what he built there was just so well thought out, so elegant. It gives you debuggers, and there's error logging, and there's a whole window at the bottom that tells you what data points do you see and how is it working with the visual. Like, the stuff is incredible. It's a full developer suite basically built into a single visual, and it's amazing. So that's really the reason why I moved away from Charticulator into Denb, because it gave me just so much more knowledge, information back about what I was building, and I could make better decisions on how I built the visual. Yeah, I think Carrie was saying, she's checking here, she says it might have been MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that built the standard for Vega and Vega Lite, and they maintain it. So there's actually a collection of colleges that continue investing in this community open source project. So Vega and Vega Lite, open source. You can see how the code's written. People are regularly adding more features to it. And there's now a consortium of people leading that helm, and they're continually building new things. You can drop Vega and Vega Lite into your website if you wanted, or you can just use it. It goes anywhere. It's not specific to Power BI or Denb Visual. It can be used in any form.
And the difference between something like Denb, especially, I think that's a transition also from pure design from the person building to a little more developer based. Like you said, it's JSON.
I would agree.
You have a developer stack. And the difference too, my initial thought is, well, what about the investment in Python or R? Those are also custom visuals or visuals that you can page. But with Denb, and I think the big distinction is it has all the capabilities in Power BI, such as the interaction and a cross-filter interaction.
Correct.
Python, I think you either have to enable it or it has to be the right type of visual.
Well, it's interesting because you say that, Tommy, because so what happens there is there's like, so if you think about how a visual is built, right, there's that little frame that lives. Okay, thank you, Carrie, for correcting it. It was the University of Washington. That University of Washington is what came out with the spec. Thank you. The frame, so when you go into Power BI, you have the properties of the visual, and then there's that little like anchors that are around the square. Yeah. There's like, they call it like a container. The visual lives in a container. And so if Python and R were going to interact with other visuals on the page, the container needs to be able to be smart enough to say, oh, look, I'm going to go listen to signals from the rest of my report and pass them into Python.
Right.
And so I think this is where the containers of R, Python and R, they just didn't do a good job. I mean, and those are maintained by Microsoft. They're visuals that Microsoft provides to us. Those containers need a little bit more love and updating so that they stay in line with the standard spec of Power BI visuals. So for me, those are misses in my opinion, of like, they just don't keep updated. And so because there's an active developer on now Charticulator and on Denb, we're getting all the new features. Microsoft is releasing cross-filtering and in-visual calculations, all the other things. You have to change your visual to use those new features. If you don't change your visual to use them, it just falls behind. And so without active development to keep these visuals up to date, you start seeing other things like, again, Microsoft probably prioritizes other features above, hey, let's make sure we keep the Python visual up to date. Let's make sure because there's like only 10 people using them. We shouldn't spend all this time and money building them better.
For the record, we're talking about the custom R code and not the R custom visuals that are in Power BI. So those do have the cross filter interaction, like the correlation chart. But if I actually want to write code to build the visual, I know we're getting near time, and I love Denb, but I want to take this person in the mailbag or someone who's maybe more Charticulator based, not developer based. Sell me, or not sell me, but what's my road to start using Denb? Like, where do I start if I'm like, I don't know. When you say developer stack, I'm a stack of pancakes. I don't know what you're talking about. Where do we go from here if I want to start really getting more advanced in custom visuals?
I love that question. And I just asked the same question into the chat as well. If anyone in chat's listening to this one, all 5 of you or whatever, whoever's there, please, if you're using Denb, what are you finding? Put it in the chat window. Like, what are you finding that's valuable to you around using Denb? And so I'll give a little bit of my experience. Hopefully Carrie will jump in some as well. But I think, where do I get started, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things I found that seems to be a lot richer is Charticulator has some documentation around it. There's a little bit there, some community support. You can find some videos on YouTube. It's definitely out there. You can get some help. But I feel like the Denb and the Vega, because Vega and Vega Lite are this open source library of things, it's not specific to Power BI. I feel like the community support around Denb has been much larger. There's a lot more people who can answer the questions around how would I build a visual that looks like this? Or when I build a visual, this part of my spec seems weird. How would I retool that so it works correctly? And so for me, there's actually a really good, you go to Denb Visual Gallery. They've got like 30 or 40 different custom visuals that are all right there. You can literally copy the spec, drop it right into Denb, and boom, it starts working.
Carrie has a ton too.
Carrie has a ton on her website. She's got I don't know, maybe 30, maybe 40 now. I don't know how many but there's tons of visuals that she's built. And they're pretty visuals. There's a flower, a petal one. There's all these other interesting things that you wouldn't normally. She did one around the Beatles album, I believe. There was like some music that she did. It was incredible. So like the stuff that people can come up with in these visuals are just way, way ahead. And the neat part is Carrie publishes the spec on how it was built, and you could take pieces of that or learn from that and build other visual elements on top of it. So for me, it's just really rich to see the community supporting these things. And if I'm getting started, it's my initial tip or trick would be start building the standard visuals. Go out and learn how to build some of the standard visuals first. And then from there, go look at a lot of examples. And this is where I think the community is not quite there yet. We don't really have a centralized place for Charticulator and Denb to do like centralized learning around all this. But I think with some effort there from the community, you can start centralizing all this information and becoming really, really rich in this. And Carrie also recommends the Vega Lite documentation. It's really rich. They tell you every property, how it works, how to set it up, little examples. I mean, the documentation is just on point. So that's where I would start from a developer standpoint. I start learning, that spec, start learning from the examples on the internet. There's a whole web editor. You can just go use it today and muck around with specs and things that are out there already, adjust things, see what changes, and that will probably get you closer to what you want to build as the final form. I don't have any other comments. Any other, Seth, Tommy, any comments you've used or found that working with these kind of tools?
No, I haven't dove into them nearly as deep as you. I think the natural progression of where I would invest more of my time is certainly in Denb, because it is not as, I think, I feel Charticulator in comparison to Denb is still like the framework that I can't bust out of, right?
Yeah.
Whereas because you have the full capabilities of those visualization platforms underneath, as far as like Vega and Vega Lite, like the sky's the limit, right? So, and to your point, I think having a larger community is also something that makes a tool more useful to a wider audience. And because it's based on a wider open platform, right, where people are using those to custom build things on their own for different visualization efforts, having that just leveraged in Denb, offers folks a lot more ability to learn new things and kind of develop in a co-partner way, right? Like you're kind of, hey, here's a sample instead of starting from scratch, right? And I think that's where you pull along more people, because you learn by example and repetition of, oh, okay, this is why this thing does this, and it's a little bit easier to get into a custom dev sort of framework. But ultimately, if you want to, from just comparison, right, seeing some of the things that can come out of the Denb visual experience versus a Charticulator, if you want to, to the poster, if you want to elevate your game even more so than you already have, right, like Deneb's the route for you.
Yeah. And I think that goes along my last point too. If you're starting from the same point of, let's say, inexperience, both of them have a learning curve, Charticulator and Denb. However, one of them has the inspiration of, again, we just talked about, you can look at and download 70 examples of what Denb can do.
Yeah.
And there's probably going to be more use cases for it, and a lot more flexibility. That being said, my last kind of concluding thought here is, I still want to give love to the normal custom visuals out there too, because they're still the ones that Microsoft built back in the day, man. I'm talking 2016 when they had their own website before it was the app source. I still use to this day the histogram and the box plot that were still out there that I still find a ton of value in. So I think there's always going to be a point if you're building something in Denb of, I think that I would need to gauge of the value add for this type of custom visual compared to building or taking something that's already coming standard out of the box. And I think that's something that you need to evaluate yourself, because no matter how experienced you are on Denb or how experienced you are on Charticulator, it's still going to take time to build.
It's a great point. I wouldn't go to custom dev until you fully understand all the native and things in app source that are available to you.
Yeah.
Right. Which you probably already are if you're going that route, unless you just love the visual interface and visualization aspect, then I would, say maybe that's where you're starting. But definitely an extremely useful tool to differentiate yourself in any environment is to pick up the Denb skill. Yeah.
Excellent. With that, I just kind of want to wrap and say thank you very much for talking about this cool topic. I think these are definitely pushing Microsoft to keep things modern and current. I think stay tuned. There's going to be more stuff coming in this space. I'm very excited and continually investing my time in learning of all those custom visuals. The one I learned the most is Denb. That's the one I want to spend the most time around. It's one the most rewarding. I find a lot of satisfaction in building it. And there's a ton of great examples, tutorials, education around that tool in general. So if you're not learning Denb, you don't know what it is, you should definitely spend some time doing it. I'll also put in to the website here directly the Denb visual or the Denb website. So there is a actual website maintained by Daniel Marsh-Patrick that has like a really rich amount of documentation on there. I'll put that in the chat as well. Make sure you go check out the denebviz.github.io. That's where Denb lives currently, and it's all its documentation, what it's there to do, examples, and other things as well. Highly recommend you spend some time learning there. I believe Carrie, I got to give her mad credit here. The Denb logo has been reworked. It's got this nice, cool coloring design to it. I believe Carrie was the one who helped influence the coloring of Denb and making its visual. So, Carrie, thank you very much for your contributions to the community. You're amazing. We love the things that you're doing there. We want to give you a big shout out because this visual wouldn't be where it is without all of your investment and time and knowledge that you share freely with us. So, thank you so much. That's, again, the power of our community. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate everyone for jumping in and joining with us today. We know your time is valuable, and you probably could have been doing a lot of emails and a lot of really heavy work things, but instead, important things, right? Instead, you spend it with us, talking about custom visuals and learning more things around the Power BI ecosystem. So thank you very much for spending time with us in this way. We really appreciate you. Our ask, we only have one ask, is look, we don't do advertising on the podcast. If you found value from this one, we really appreciate you just communicating to other people. You found value in the podcast and you like it. So just let someone else know. This is a cool medium to learn more about Power BI. We'd love it if you could share it with somebody else, either on social medias or just talk about it with someone at work. If you actually go into a building to work anymore, I don't know who does that, but people do apparently. That being said, Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
Well, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. If you have a question, an idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode, head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. Finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all Power BI.tips social media channels.
Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.